Now, do you have any fun stories that you want to share about working here at RunSignup?
Well, yeah, maybe, so I think one of the honors that I have at RunSignup is I've got to be the oldest employee. I'm 71 now, so I'm getting up there. And so with age comes forgetfulness. And one of my trips out to Morristown in the airport, lost my phone. Just this today, on the Uber drive from the hotel to the office, left my phone in the Uber car. Yep. He's showing kind of he's getting a little senile here. We better take a look at Roger.
So I'm here with Roger Bradshaw. He's a software developer with the Event Day team. And Roger, we usually ask how do people start at RunSignup, but I'm going to ask you, how did you start with the race director?
So I was my career was with Gerber, and Gerber is headquartered in a pretty small town in West Michigan, Fremont, Michigan, about an hour northwest of Grand Rapids.
Now, is that Gerber, the baby food company?
Gerber, the baby food company. And actually they eventually got acquired by Nestle. And so when I retired, I was actually a Nestle employee. And I was a runner in high school, and I was in the Fremont JC organization. And they decided to do a winter fest in West Michigan in February. So, Roger, you're a runner. Why don't you organize a race? So this was back in 1979, probably. So I did, and we had our winter race first weekend in February. And being a software developer for Gerber, and kind of lazy anyway, I really got tired of scoring it manually. So, and by manually, this was popsicle sticks and stuff like that. So I, and my boss knew about this, but I wrote a little program in Gerber's mainframe to score this little race. Well, to fast forward, the race kept going. I also helped score races in the area throughout the year, maybe 2 or 3. And pretty soon PCs came along, so I rewrote the software in a database language and used it locally for races. And then someone was helping me in the mid-'80s and said, boy, this is a pretty slick package. You ever think of selling it? So April of 1989, I put an ad in Runner's World about race scoring software. In 89, I got 3 or 4 people interested. In 90, I got 5 or 6, and it just kept growing a little bit. Meantime, I'm doing quite a bit of traveling with Gerber, so I got lots of time in hotels and on planes, and so this is my hobby business. So I keep going at it and keep going at it, and pretty soon there's 2 major scoring pieces of software in the U.S. RunScore and Race Director. And it kept going and it kept going, and pretty soon it gets to be 2013, and I think, well, I'm 59, I'm going to retire, and I'm just going to do race director full time.
Now, where did the name the race director come from?
Well, that was, because I technically was the race director, and at that point in time, if there was a such thing as timers out there probably was. I didn't really connect that there's a difference between the physical timing of a race and putting on a race. And so I was considered the race director for, the race that I started. And so I just picked that name and it stuck.
So what was your background in development before working at Gerber?
So I didn't really have a development background at all before. I joined Gerber in 1976, back when development was writing, business-oriented programs for things like managing sales and inventory and things like that. My particular area at Gerber, as far as a supply chain company, was in manufacturing systems and inventory systems and cost systems. So my most of my experience was designing systems to meet users' needs, and only at first was I actually a programmer. And because in those days the career progression was if you were doing well as a programmer, they immediately progressed you up through, developing systems, designs, and things like that. And I just love programming. And so so Race Director actually gave me an outlet for keeping my fingers in development. Because in my career, I just didn't have that any longer. So in 2013 and 2014, given a full-time effort, it really started to grow, as did the questions. Are you going to keep going with this? How are we ever going to get out of this? And so as at that point in time, I was connected with lots of things, different ship systems and different registration companies. This guy by the name of Bob Bickle took a real interest in Race Director and a special interest in this community of timers that was really engaged with my software. And so I actually approached Bob saying, do you think you could help me find a way out of this at some point in time? So it didn't take him long, and he said, well, why don't you join RunSignup? And so in 2015 I did, and we did it with the thought that we would start developing the replacement for Race Director. We never even thought about just taking the software on and, growing the software. Pretty much the idea was, and I totally agreed with it, just wipe the slate clean and let's start developing a new package, which is what we've done with RaceDay Scoring. So in doing so, I've been able to stay with RunSignup from 2015 until today, and Bob is kind enough to let me keep going. We're still supporting Race Director, even though now RaceDay Scoring is just a much better product than Race Director. So that's where I'm at.
So what exactly do you do with RaceDay Scoring?
So I've really never been a part of any of the development. Initially, I provided the blueprint, if you will, as far as describing how Race Director was designed, and especially knowing the mistakes I made and how I built the software, especially the database underlying the software. So I think I was probably helpful in getting this established in a pretty good data point as far as what the data should look like. But my input to the development team is more in helping the blueprint the product at first, and there's really not very much of that anymore because the RaceDay Scoring is actually a very mature product now. So now I'm mostly helping doing the testing, answering questions from time to time about approaches we should take. And as an example, the landscape changes quite a bit. Cross country is a good example. The requirements out there in cross country, athletic.net or MileSplit, they need integration of results, and it changes every year. TIFRs for college or NCAA. So, a good example right now is MileSplit. They just changed their whole approach to how we send them results. So I took that on and said, well, I'll implement this first in Race Director, and then I'll give you, the developers in RaceDay Scoring detailed specs on how to get it done. And so I'm just trying to, I love being involved in this business, and as fewer and fewer timers are using Race Director, that's really been my goal too. Is I'm not a full-time employee anymore. I'm gradually, I think I'm at like 70% now, and next year it'll be 60. And as users taper off of Race Director, I'm going to kind of go into the sunset with it. So it's really, the way this has turned out, I couldn't have dreamed it any better. I'm just extremely happy with how it's working.
Now, you're known by a lot of timers who are using the Race Director, or who have used the Race Director and are now moving over to RaceDay Scoring. What's a question that you get a lot from people who are meeting you?
Is RaceDay Scoring really going to work as well as Race Director did? That's the big fear, and I, my normal response is, well, you're probably not gonna believe it just based on what I say. What you should do is pick your newest employee that doesn't know Race Director, that doesn't know RaceDay Scoring, and just have them try out both products. And they're sure to say, why would you ever think about Race Director when you've got RaceDay Scoring like this? So,
Now, what do you think the greatest strength is of the development team here at RunSignup?
well, obviously, excellent developers, and we're putting the product into you know, a modern environment, though, the place it should be. But what's impressed me most and what I felt was so important to the product is how we're supporting it. We've got a really good support team and questions from the field. So in Race Director, TimeWorks were sort of lucky in that I was almost always there, and I'm the only person that's doing all the development. So even on a race weekend, if some severe problem happened, I could often fix it and get the timer on their way without the race even knowing it. And I see the RaceDay support team doing the same thing. I mean, we've got a RaceDay Scoring developer on call every weekend. We've got 2 or 3 people looking at tickets, and I feel very complimented by the timers and the loyalty that they've had. And if I'm really honest, I'm not that good of a developer, but I really have always been very serious about support, and I think that's a lesson that RunSignup has known all along, because in their entire portfolio of products, there's no question that every segment of RunSignup applications are very well supported. So I think what maybe a lot of timers feared is they wouldn't get that special care that they had with Race Director. Once they finally get over to RaceDay Scoring, I think they're all finding that the support is just as good or maybe even better than they had with Race Director.
Support just used to be you for the Race Director,
That's right. Yeah.
That's a lot you took on.
Yeah. So.
Well, thanks, Roger.
All right.